Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of my podcast, Is Breakfast Included? How you guys doing? Good. Today on the show, I have a conversation with Lyle Blackburn. Now, Lyle is an author, a band leader, a documentary narrator, a cryptozoologist. He also has his own brand of hot sauce, which I hear goes really good on eggs. He's written such books as Boggy Creek Casebook, The Sinister Swamps, Beyond Boggy Creek, The Beast of Boggy Creek. He's also narrated several documentaries about those same topics. Lyle does so much that he has a really cool band called Ghoultown, and we didn't even talk about his band. Isn't that crazy? He has a podcast debuting this month called Monstro Bizarro. Check it out. I had a lot of fun with this. Lyle and I have crossed paths over the years, but we really didn't know each other. I've always been a huge fan of his, and I was really happy that he agreed to do this. Anyway, I hope you enjoy it. Let's check it out. So, Without further ado, tell everyone who you are.
Well, my name is Lyle Blackburn, and I'm an author, musician, and monster hunter. That's what I sort of classify just in general. I do a variety of things. I'm in a band called Ghoultown, and I've performed in bands most of my life. And at some point, I wrote for the horror magazine Rue Morgue, and then eventually wrote a book, which was about a creature supposedly seen in southern Arkansas, and that kind of translated into this sort of cryptid hunting, monster hunting author career that sort of went off on a tangent. That led to doing television shows. So I've been on shows like Strange Evidence and Finding Bigfoot and Monsters and Mysteries in America. So occasionally I do that, and I've been in various documentaries, television shows, and what have you. So crazy stuff.
Well, right on. Like a few of your books are based on the Boggy Creek monster. Was that your foray into all this?
Yeah, it was. I was always, from an early age, I was just really into monsters, monster movies, and things like that. I love Frankenstein, the Wolfman, and at some point, became aware of stories about the Yeti and Bigfoot and Loch Ness Monster, and I thought, hey, that's cool. It's like you might see a real life monster. And then sometime when I was really young, I saw a movie called The Legend of Boggy Creek, which was kind of a drive-in sensation in the 1970s. And it was a movie that was sort of a docudrama horror film about a Bigfoot-like creature seen in southern Arkansas, not far from where I grew up here in Dallas-Fort Worth area. And that, really did it, because that was more of a scary creature. And it was like, whoa, this is like a Bigfoot thing in our area. And it kind of had that southern swampy feel. So that's what eventually, as an adult, I was like, well, what is the true story behind it? Because it was based on true sightings and stories. And that's where I ended up kind of getting into this monster hunting thing.
And you've narrated a few documentaries. One, of course, about the Boggy Creek monster, the Beast of Boggy Creek. I recently watched Skinwalkers. Is that something that caught your interest because of the of where it happened? So the proximity to Texas and Louisiana.
Well, the way I got into the documentary thing was I met a guy years ago at this huge event called the Ohio Bigfoot Conference, and I was there when I'd just written, I think, just the first book, The Beast of Boggy Creek, and he was wanting to get into sort of doing documentaries and films along the lines of what I was doing, and we talked about that briefly, and he ended up starting a film company called Small Town Monsters, and he was out of Ohio. And his third film, he wanted to do the Boggy Creek case. And since I had already written a book and done a lot of research up in that area, knew witnesses that had claimed to see it, he ended up partnering with me to make that film. And in the process of that, I narrated it and I was in it. And I guess coming from my music background in the band and the voice thing, people liked the way I narrated it. So that was successful. So I just kind of continued to narrate their movies, and I've done, I believe, 8 so far. One of those being the most recent, which is Skinwalker, Howl of the Rougarou, which is about the subject of a werewolf-like creature that's known in the Cajun culture of southern Louisiana.
Uh-huh.
And so, all those are things that I sort of dwell in and on a daily basis of researching these cases. But it's close to home, and it's a great way for me to just have film work without me having to make a film myself.
Yeah, yeah. Has anyone ever told you a story that you just were like, yeah, I don't believe it, or do you firmly believe in these creatures?
Well, I remain pretty balanced, and and it's true. A lot of these cases, the Boggy Creek case, and a lot of these have just totally transformed. A lot of times, small towns, near rural areas where these creatures are seen and become legends, and they're on TV and documentaries. And those are interesting because it's not only people see this monster, but it has a cultural effect, a lot like the Rougarou did. And so yes, you meet people constantly that say, I had a sighting, or my dad had a sighting, or I live in that town and I've heard this and that. Not all of it stands up to scrutiny, and certainly there's more credible witnesses than others,
Mm-hmm.
or sometimes people may be wishful thinking. So, I've had some weird things happen and stuff, but without having, put eyes on one of these creatures, I certainly wouldn't say I believe in them. I believe that there's a possibility, or there's something going on, because a percentage of these witnesses are very credible, very just your guy next door, honest people who just saw something that's completely unexplainable.
Yeah, yeah. You don't write it off as like you're crazy or anything.
No, most, but the majority of the time, I don't. They're portrayed a lot on the news, like they always show the craziest guy, or whatever. I saw Bigfoot, but in reality, most of the people who see this are quite, ordinary, or just, people who live in those kind of areas that saw something run across the road. So more often than not, I'm thinking they saw something,
Yeah, yeah. I come from a Mexican culture, and our legend was La Llorona. And so growing up, that was kind of like the Rougarou, if you don't behave, she's gonna come get you. Have you ever dove into that legend?
Not too much, I'm aware of it, but I haven't done, usually a lot of it's dictated by if it's a book or a part of something I'm working on where I can really delve into a certain creature or subject or, cultural legend, then I will. But yeah, that hasn't come up too much, and I haven't studied it too much.
Okay. The Mothman of Point Pleasant, you co-wrote that.
Yeah, Seth Breedlove. He's basically the director and the idea man and the force behind that.
Uh-huh.
So, Mothman was the follow up to the Boggy Creek film, and that was something where now I wasn't on camera for that one, so then I helped with the writing of the script and just to really formalize it for the narration, and then narrated it. But I've been up to that town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia several times, and into that area where people reported seeing this, huge winged humanoid thing, which kind of came to prominence back in 1966 and 1967. But that thing has become a rock star of cryptozoology. The Mothman, talk about transforming a little town.
Yeah.
They have a festival once a year that draws like 10,000 people to this town that's like little bitty.
Yeah, I had never heard of it. I saw the movie back in the early 2000s, and I was pretty fascinated. So when I saw this documentary, I watched it, and it's just amazing how it's become the town. You know.
Right. And that one reason the movie helped a lot, which was a movie from the 1990s called The Mothman Prophecies, which is the name taken from a book written by John Keel about those incidents. And of course, the Hollywood movie is very loosely kind of based. It's a cool movie, but that helped to kind of make that Mothman case more famous, kind of like the Legend of Boggy Creek made the Boggy Creek thing. Because obviously, when there's a hit movie or some people would see, they're like, oh, what is Mothman? And yeah, it's just become this. There's a museum there now and statues, and people just go there every weekend just to, look at the place where Mothman was sighted.
What do you think it is about the South that kind of these legends, this folklore? What do you think it is about the South that I don't want to say paranormal activity, but that thing that it's a high concentration of it in the South?
I don't know. I think part of it is the landscape. You've got a variety of desert-like conditions to the west, southwest, and you've got swampy areas, coastal regions, the foothills of the Appalachians. You've got, Carolinas, and it's just a very vast, diverse areas. And a lot of the settlers, that came and dispersed across, just had these pockets of cultures that, that already either had monster tales or something weird happened that just became part of the, cultural fabric going forth. And that could be things that happened even in the 1980s, for example, that now there's a monster. But, of course, the North has, they have a lot of lake monsters. They have some other things that we don't have as much down here. We don't have the Great Lakes and all these big things. So ours is more of a variety of strange cryptids and stories. And I just love the Southern stuff, being from Texas and stuff. People like, well, you can write a Bigfoot book about the Pacific Northwest. I'm like, no, man, there's all kinds of stuff here. And I love that Southern flavor of all these stories.
And so this has been part of your life pretty much your whole life.
Yeah. I mean, I can remember hunting with my father and then, sort of thinking about the Boggy Creek monster. And I don't know, just kind of never even thinking I could do any quote unquote career in researching monsters, but studying them nonetheless. And then once I did write the Beast of Boggy Creek book, it was so quick that I got a publishing deal. Literally, it came out, and 2 months later, I was on a cable, was on like Animal Planet or whatever, and it just boom, it was there. And so I've written several more books, and it just has those subject matters have gotten really big in the last 10 or 12 years. So I just kind of picked the right time, I guess.
Yeah. I meant to ask you this earlier. You study cryptozoology? Did I pronounce it right?
Cryptozoology.
It's cryptozoology. Explain to our listeners what that is.
Cryptozoology is basically a unofficial term for one that researches undocumented or unproven animals or creatures, or even creatures that are said to be thought to be extinct that may still be with us. And that obviously zoology would be there's a field you can actually study and get accreditation in, whereas crypto, which means cryptic or hidden, was added to that, and that was coined, back in about the 1960s. And it's not an official term. I mean, people will call it pseudoscience or whatever. And even for me, I really never said I'm a cryptozoologist, but for lack of a better term, that's, if a newspaper interviews me or whatever, they're going to call me something, not because in some ways I'm an author, but in some ways I'm like Indiana Jones, because I'm going out there and I got to go look where these people say they've seen something, and I love the outdoors and stuff. So cryptozoology is just kind of a term where people,
a blanket term,
right? And
is it better than being called like a monster hunter?
I like monster hunter better, because just like the kid in me thinks that's cool, but it almost sounds hokey. But I don't know. But the problem with cryptozoology is, I could make a Facebook page saying, Johnny Smith, cryptozoologist. Well, it's not like you can get a degree in it, so you can just say you are. So it's kind of like, I'm not sure I want to be something that you don't actually have any qualifications other, academically or anything.
Yeah. Yeah. What is your favorite horror work, or your favorite, style of horror?
I like the more atmospheric movies and more of the monster creature features, I guess. I like, started out with all the Universal monster movies when I was a kid, and all the, the 50s and 60s giant monsters, and then, the Hammer horror films. Those are some of my favorites, sort of that gothic setting, old world with, vampires and werewolves, and just kind of the new spin. And then, going forward, I like things that are practical effects. I'm not much for CGI monsters, and I don't care about how much blood is in the movie. I just like a big, or creepy or swamp monster, or just even a cheesy, a cheesy monster. I just love those kind of films.
That was my next question. How do you feel about like current horror movies where it's just a bunch of blood?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think those, those don't appeal to me. I find that usually those, if you depend on the blood as your attraction rather than either a well-written script or just a cool kind of iconic monster, but there's been some, there's recent horror films that kind of are creature features that I think are good. So it's never really just sort of a blanket, like I like all old stuff. It's like I like a little bit of everything all the way,
Yeah. Is there any current author or director or filmmaker that has impressed you lately?
I'm trying to say some of it seems like there's so much stuff now, like it comes at me. It's often hard to, it's a bit of a blur as to where the old stuff. So a lot of times I don't know who directed it. There's a, let's see, trying to think of a creature feature film like Ritual, which was probably about 4 years old. That's a good one. And there's a creature and some guys hiking, and it's I think it's actually a European production. But, I don't really know who directed it even off the top of my head, but
it's just something that you like.
But there's a movie right there that I'm like, I think it's a modern version of where they've created this sort of, it's almost like a cryptid, the creature that they end up finding, and just a really weird thing. So it's sort of like that, where I'll just, I'll try stuff. I got Shutter Channel, so I'll go on. They have a creature feature based, a monster category. So I'll just dwell in that usually, which is great because then I can isolate down to the things I most like.
Yeah. Are you constantly discovering things that you didn't know about, or do you are you like a creature feature historian?
I just kind of stumble on stuff, really, and I mean, I would be considered a historian as far as cryptids in horror films,
Okay.
which primarily there's mostly Bigfoots in horror films, and I've written articles for like Horror Hound magazine and other things like that. And I've done I worked for Rue Morgue Horror magazine, and I covered creature features that were like based on cryptids, like that, things that people had said they had seen, chupacabra, lake monsters. And because that's sort of been my career path for about 13 years, it takes up a lot of my time, whereas in my off hours I may watch other various horror films, but not to the, I guess, a research level or whatever, historian level.
Yeah. Well, man, I've got a few more questions. This one I've been wanting to ask you. What scares you?
I would say people scare me the most. Because people go, "Oh my God, you go out in these swamps, you go, it's scary. I mean, aren't you afraid that if there is a Bigfoot, it's going to kill you, or a lake monster?" I said, I'm really not worried about that. I mean, there have been, yes, some reports where supposedly people got attacked, but honestly, I'm worried more about if I run across some meth heads or some, organization of pot growers in the woods. I'm worried about the people.
Yeah.
And people, I don't know, in this day and age, irrational bullshit and crazy stuff. I just love monsters and stuff, and it's a different world, I think, than the horrors of humans.
Yeah, true. I agree with you. You've got a podcast coming out called Monster Bizarro. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. I've kind of avoided that for a while. People are like, "Hey, you got to have a podcast," and it's kind of become a thing. But I'm so busy writing books and, the music and everything else, I've kind of avoided it because I'm like, I don't know if I can fit it in. But, I think I've got things to offer, and it's another outlet where I can, kind of like narrating the movies, So I've developed something that I think is a little bit different format than just, to want to copy what's already there. And so I'm launching that pretty soon. I've been kind of developing it, and it's the title is Monstro Bizarro, and it's actually based on this column I had in Rue Morgue magazine, where I just had this Monstro Bizarro topic where I talked about, people seeing creatures and legends and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, it's something I got in the works.
And have any idea when that'll launch?
I'm thinking April.
And my apologies for butchering the name. I can't read my own writing here.
Right. No worries. It's all monstro something, But probably April. And the only reason I just get waylaid sometimes. I just shot some episodes for a major kind of network show, and those will pop up, and I'm like, well, I got to do that. So it'll, my timelines get pushed, which I've never had. It's never been a restriction when I'm writing a book, because I just mostly write it, and when I'm done, I'll either send it to the publisher or publish it. But with the podcast, I got to be a little more on schedule.
Yeah. Well, you kind of touched on this earlier. You get to investigate creatures, for lack of a better term. You get to write books. You get to narrate documentaries and be in movies. Do you ever take a step back and think like, wow, this is, like I'm one of the few that get to do it?
Yeah, I do. I mean, people say, is this something you set out to do? I was like, I never even occurred to me that this could be even a career field. So I do say, wow, this is cool. I mean, every day I get to do stuff that I like, and it's not like a job or anything to me. Mostly I really only think about it like when I'm doing an interview and somebody says something like, man, that's great. I'm like, yeah, I do appreciate this opportunity and what it's developed. So, it's definitely cool.
Right on, man. Well, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, Lyle. My podcast. We've just talked about all this really cool shit, and now here comes the question. My podcast is called "Is Breakfast Included?" And if it was included, what would you have?
Well, that's an easy one, because if breakfast is included, it would have to consist of biscuits and gravy, which I love, and that's probably a Southern thing. And it would also need to have some sort of eggs, like scrambled eggs, and that would need to be topped with my Blackburn's original Monster Sauce. Monster Sauce is my signature hot sauce that I launched last year, and according to the fan of the sauce, everybody loves it on eggs, so I would always have eggs with Monster Sauce.
Oh, I'll definitely have to try it, man. Well, man, I appreciate your time. Is there anything else you want to plug? Your podcast, your hot sauce, anything? Where can they find you on social media or any of your products?
Right. Yes. For more information on the various things that I do, you can visit lyleblackburn.com, and that's got links to my online store where you could get the hot sauce, and it's also available in some limited retail outlets. All that information, my books are available on Amazon. The movies you can watch on Amazon Prime is a good place. If you just type in Lyle Blackburn, it'll search and pull up the movies that we've done. So yeah, just I'm on Facebook and all that. So just Lyle Blackburn, search it out.
Right on, man. Well, I've watched the Mothman of Point Pleasant. I've watched the Skinwalker documentary. My next one is Boggy Creek, so I'm looking forward to it.
Great, awesome. I'm glad you watched those. They were a lot of fun to make, and they're good little pieces of history. So appreciate that.
Well, man, I do thank you for your time. I know you're busy. I know you got a big show coming up this weekend. Was it last weekend or this weekend?
I just did two Ghoultown gigs last weekend, and then I'm getting ready to travel out to the mountains of Georgia for a little vacation and a little bit of monster research up in that area. So,
all right, man. Well, Lyle, thanks again for doing this. I appreciate your time, and be safe, man.
Right on. Appreciate it.
All right. Take care.
All righty.
Bye. Right on. Lyle Blackburn. I told you it was going to be interesting, yeah? You can find links to everything at lyleblackburn.com. His books, the documentaries, the band, the hot sauce, Monstro Bizarro. He's got some information about that on there. Check it out. Go support him. He also has dates of his appearances coming up. Like I said, support. All right, guys, I am done. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you next week.